Once again, here's your host, Michael Corbin.
And again, as I've mentioned tonight, we have a very, very, very important program, and we're going to be talking about something that's very, very real. And as I mentioned earlier, it's very serious because this has the potential to impact not only your health, but the health of your children and future generations to come. And this is quite an unusual mystery, and believe me, at this particular stage of the game, we're just about as mystified as you're going to be when you hear about it. So stay tuned for that. Before also, I want to go give out our phone numbers again. Our number tonight, if you want to reach my guests, is 303-537-3119, 303-537-3119, and 303-367-1116. That's how you can reach us. Now, also, since this program is now being webcasted, I'd like to invite all of you right now to go to www.carnicom.com, and I'll spell that for you. It's www.carnicom.com. We're going to be talking about this topic tonight. There's a very interesting photograph and a story that goes with that on this website about what we're going to be talking about now. Now, let's introduce my guests. We have two of them on the line tonight. They are actually here in the Denver area tonight. And I would like to welcome to the program Dave Peterson and Clifford Carnicom. Good evening, gentlemen.
Yeah.
Thank you for being on the program.
Yes. Good evening, Michael. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you fine.
Okay, I can barely hear you.
Okay, we'll work on that as we go along here. Now, Clifford, you're the gentleman that is working, doing a lot of the research on this stuff that's known as chemtrails. Now, if we could start off by acquainting the audience with what is a chemtrail.
Sure, Michael, and thank you for inviting me to be on the show tonight. I think that it's fair to admit that there is some variance and ambiguity in the definitions, but let me try to explain some of the characteristics that people would look for in us making that decision or determination.
Okay.
More in terms of characteristics. Characteristics that would be associated with a chemtrail would be, first of all, emissions from an aircraft, usually at high altitude. The emissions would often and normally be continuous. That means in a continuous line, often from horizon to horizon. Another characteristic would be the density of that trail. And remember, what we're contrasting this against is what would be called a contrail,
right,
which is composed of water vapor. Water vapor is expected to dissipate in a fairly short period of time, normally anywhere, say, 15 to 45 seconds. What we're speaking of is a trail that is emitted from an aircraft and does not dissipate. So this would be a third characteristic that's extremely important, and that is the persistence of the trail, its tendency to linger. Number 4 would be the frequent transformation of that trail into a cloud layer. It would appear initially to be forming into a cirrus cloud layer, but there is a lot of variance with these. A fifth characteristic would be that at certain times it can be easily shown through photography that these trails emit at a location other than the engines. There are some rather remarkable photographs, these are telephotos, that show emissions of a material across the full length of the wingspan of an aircraft, where the engines of that aircraft are located in the rear alongside the fuselage. So in certain cases, it's very clear to demonstrate that the emissions are not coming from the engines. So these would be characteristics that I would say a person would associate with an aircraft, as opposed to their counterparts, which would be that of fairly typical rapid dissipation, non-continuous, non-persistent, coming from the engines of the aircraft clearly, and following the physical behavior of water vapor, namely disappearing in a fairly short period of time.
So we have to definitely make a distinction between a contrail, which is basically a natural occurring phenomena that is emitted from the interaction of the warm jet exhaust with the cooled atmosphere up above where it's flying. Is that correct?
Absolutely, and an all familiar phenomenon which we have witnessed really throughout our lives, and it's nothing unexpected, it's nothing unusual, and it's perfectly analogous to when we take our car down the highway on a cold winter morning, and we have initial formation of a trail that would rapidly dissipate behind us.
Right, okay. Now, one thing I want to bring up, and you mentioned this just now in the description of a chemtrail, one of the characteristics of it, which I find very interesting because I cannot remember ever seeing a trail coming from an airplane as it's flying above me that appeared to dissipate, or if you will, expand into what looks like, as you mentioned, a cirrus cloud. Now, with that in mind, and I'm sure that the listeners will kind of get an idea of what we're talking about, because I'm sure they have seen it too, because you have some very remarkable photographs on your website. And again, that URL for that is www.carnicom.com, carnicom.com. And I invite you listening to go and look at this as we interview Clifford and Dave, because he's got some very interesting photographs of chemtrails, or what are being called chemtrails. Now, Clifford, let's talk a little bit about, first of all, how did you get involved in this? And let's kind of lead into what you are discovering in your research.
Michael, I suppose my involvement goes in two stages. The first stage is prefaced, or let's say occurs at more of a subconscious level, where I simply was not aware of the activities which were likely affecting me. And this was in the northwestern part of the United States, in Montana,
okay,
where I came up with a rather unusual illness of a respiratory nature, which did not go away. The characteristics were that of a cough, persistent cough, deep-seated bronchial nature, which lingered eventually for a 2 to 3 year period and actually never did go away. And so I eventually moved to the southwestern part of the United States in Santa Fe, New Mexico, for the express purpose of improving my health, certainly as a major reason as to why I moved.
Right.
My direct involvement began on February 14th of 1999, when I took my camera outside and simply photographed that which I was observing. And what I observed in a clear fashion was a trail being emitted from an aircraft on a perfectly clear blue sunny sky. If one is familiar with the desert environment of Santa Fe, New Mexico, it's high desert and very clear skies and very low humidity. And an aircraft flew overhead, and this aircraft left a trail which satisfied all the characteristics that I'm speaking of above, with the exception of not extending from wingtip to wingtip. There is another set which commonly appears at the stabilizer region of the aircraft, the tail of the aircraft, and that's the nature of this one. Over a 15 to 20 minute period, that trail that I was observing transformed itself into a cloud layer, and within 20 minutes changed a perfectly clear sky into a cirrus, partially occluded sky. And that was my first direct involvement. And since that point, I have embarked, let's say, on an endeavor to collect additional photographs, fairly high quality with telephoto lenses, to remove any ambiguity or doubt as to what is occurring. And that effort has continued now for close to a year and a half. Okay.
Now, I personally can attest to some of this because, as I told you, when we were together talking about this, that I myself have had an unusual cold, if you will, something that, kind of like flu-like, if you will, that has persisted for almost 3 months now with me. And I was first acquainted with the notion of chemtrails last year when I started hearing about it popping up in various places. And it was at that time that I started noticing this phenomena that you're describing of emissions from what appears to be jet engines or jets flying overhead that dissipate or expand into what look like cirrus clouds. And the thing I'm wondering is this. Now, you got involved in this, and your research has taken you into a variety of different places. And I want to kind of focus on, for example, we're going to talk about samples and that kind of thing, because I know you've got something about the biological components identified. We'll cover that when we come back from this break, okay?
Sure will. Thank you very much, Michael.
Okay, our number tonight is 303-537-3119, 303-537-3119. My guests tonight are Clifford Carnicom and Dave Peterson. We're talking about chemtrails, and we're going to find out a lot more about them. Some of the stuff